Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Jeff. Now, I normally talk about, pulpy, action-packed, fantasy, science fiction, weird horror, detective or mystery fiction, pulp, crime, fantasy, sword and sorcery, and occasionally I'll talk about some things that I collect that are off the beaten path and that I do sometimes read. Now, last month I introduced some of my juvenile fiction collection. Again, it was a pretty small and eclectic collection. I had a pretty decent response to that, where people were interested in and has shared their stories very kindly and very interestingly, shared their stories and memories of their earliest reading experiences with some of those books, like the Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew Mysteries, etc. But I also, at that time when I made that video, which I'll link down below, I mentioned that I had quite a few more fantastical talking animal children's books in my collection, and I wanted to talk about some of those in a future video. Well, that day is today. Today I'm going to talk about that. And, again, that's not something that's, it's not Men's Adventure, it's not Animal Attacks, it's not Pulp Heroes, it's not Conan or Solomon Kane or a lot of the usual stuff that I like to read and talk about on this channel. So it may put some people off as kiddie stuff, but I don't care. I think it's cool. I enjoy it. And a lot of this, it's not something that I read a lot these days, but I do occasionally read them, kids' books, children's books. And a lot of it is down to nostalgia, good memories from reading these when I was a kid up to now. Now, there is one series I won't mention today, the Freddy the Pig series. That's going to have its own video coming up in the subsequent months down the road. But I do want to talk about some of these other books that I have that here in my collection here in Japan. I'd hope to kind of get my children interested, my son interested. He hasn't proven to be particularly interested in these yet, although he does like kids' books of a sort, but not quite to the chapter book level, I guess you would say. So let's get started. So first I have The Cricket in Times Square. Now this is a paperback edition. A lot of these will be kind of mix and match. This is by George Selden with drawings by Garth Williams. Garth Williams also did the illustrations for the Laura Ingalls Wilder Little House books. And The Cricket in Times Square, I think, is pretty famous. And Garth Williams himself is quite famous for his art with, Tucker the mouse and Harry the cat living in New York City and befriending a cricket. Read this as a kid and eventually, as an adult, picked up a good copy. I also have the sequel books, or at least a couple of them. There might have been more than 3, but I have Harry Cat's Pet Puppy, which comes second to this, and then there's Tucker's Countryside, which finds Tucker and Harry in the countryside where the Chester the Cricket comes from. Anyway, this is a runner-up for the Newbery Award, Newbery Medal, and this is a Dell Yearling book. Then we have a Puffin Modern Classics edition of Rabbit Hill by Robert Larson. And again, this is also, I believe, illustrated by Mr. Larson, who just does a beautiful job of illustrating. Again, I like illustrations in adult books, let alone in kids' books, but they're de rigueur for kids' books. They are, they need to be there. Just beautifully done, about a group of animals living on a farm by an abandoned house, and the new owners come in, and is it going to be a good thing or a not so good thing with these new owners? We have various beavers and rabbits and possums and different characters, just beautiful illustrations in this. And there was a sequel, at least one, called The Long Winter, which I think I might have back home, I'm not sure. And also a side story to this called Edward, Hoppy, and Joe, which I don't have a copy of, but I remember reading and loving as a child. Now, there's a whole kind of subgenre of, prey animals, traditionally prey animals like mice and rabbits or moles, right? There's Duncton Wood about moles. These were all kind of spurred on by Richard Adams' very famous Watership Down. Now, this is by no means a kid's book. No, but it's very interesting. I did read it as a teenager and found it fascinating as a kind of a group of hares, I think, more than rabbits, maybe. They, in the British countryside, escape from their war and being gassed by humans as they're going to put a development in, and they go on a quest, and there's all sorts of violence and sex and all sorts of rabbit sex, things like that. It's very interesting and well done book, but it's by no means a kid's book. I only bring it up here because I think it influenced a lot of other children's writers, or I guess writers that took kind of straddle the line between supposed kids books and books aimed for children. Here's one that is definitely more in line with Rabbit Hill, but has some of the fantasy or quest elements of Watership Down, and this is Foxglove Hollow. Now, this is kind of a venture into a whole new world with the novel that rivals Watership Down for drama and sheer delight. So in other words, obviously trying to cash in on Watership Down. It's by no means can it compare with Watership Down, but an interesting enough work in its own right. Okay, a few other oddball ones. Let's see. We have T.H. White, the author of The Once and Future King, the famous, fantastic retelling of the Arthurian legend. He also wrote a kid's book, Mistress Masham's Repose. And this, I believe, has a nice wraparound cover here. And this involves kind of a army of little people, little fairy-type people on mouseback. Has some nice illustrations in here as well. Sometimes illustrators of children's books are famous enough that they get their own billing on the cover, but this one doesn't. But they do get it. He does get it in the interior flap here. Illustrations by Fritz Eichenberg. I'm assuming he did the cover as well. It's in the same style, so I'm guessing it is Fritz Eichenberg. This is one I haven't actually read, but it looks fascinating, and I've managed to keep a copy of this Berkeley edition for quite a long time. Let's see, a couple other odd ones out, and then I'll get to some kind of series. Speaking of George Selden, I had mentioned George Selden before. I probably should have put this after Cricket in Times Square. He wrote also this, Oscar Lobster's Fair Exchange. Okay, Friendship Beneath the Sea. This is a really interesting little book. Again, one I've had for ages. Pictures by Peter Lipman. Right? Kind of more simple but effective pictures. So Oscar Lobster, and he's got a starfish friend and a crab friend, and I forgot all his other character friends that he had. It's kind of their life in the tidal pools somewhere. 2 lunch boxes from a haunted house, forks, spoons, and a meteorite are just a few of the things 4 sea creatures managed to salvage from the humans at Crescent Beach. For Oscar Lobster had decided that people were taking too many shells and stones that didn't belong to them. It was time for retaliation. And so Oscar, James Fish, Hector Crab, and Peter Starfish set out to build and furnish a weird and wonderful garden under the sea. But suddenly Oscar's salvaging gets out of hand, and unexpected danger comes to threaten the 4 friends. Haven't read this one in decades, but I dearly loved this as a child, and so I still have it here, and one of these days I'll give it a read, see how it holds up. Now, Edith Nesbit wrote for adults, but she's also famous for writing several evocative and magical children's books, and this is probably her most famous, 5 Children and It. And this is another Dell Yearling classic edition with an afterword by Lloyd Alexander, who, of course, wrote the great Chronicles of Prydain, retelling of the Welsh Mabinogion legends. It's a really excellent kind of young adult fantasy series. And this is, of course, about 5 children who find a Samid, I guess it's called, the Samiad, some kind of weird creature that grants them some magical wishes, and they travel around the world on a magic carpet and get into all sorts of mischief. very famous kind of Victorian or Edwardian children's book. Not to be confused with T.H. White, but we have E.B. White, Stuart Little. And I've got some really cool illustrations there. Again, by Garth Williams. Garth Williams, very talented artist, and a lot of evocative art put in there. Stuart Little was made into a movie where he was voiced by Michael J. Fox. Again, the weird thing about Stuart Little is he was born to a human couple, but he's a mouse, which don't ask me how that happened. But anyway, it's interesting, very strange kind of novel, kind of goes off in some weird directions. Doesn't maybe completely make sense. In my Barnes & Noble illustrated children's classics and just illustrated classics video I did quite a while back, it's proven to be one of my more popular videos over time. Still get views on that every week. I talked about more of E.B. White's work in this beautiful bound edition of his stories, Charlotte's Web and Other Illustrated Classics, which includes The Trumpet of the Swan and Stuart Little, as well as Charlotte's Web. And again, you got beautiful gilt lettering and big text with beautiful art, again, by Garth Williams. It's got the ribbon and everything. Lovely edition. Of course, I also at the time, I'll just run through them real quick again. I showed off my Peter Rabbit. This is my wife and I's collection from every time we go to Barnes & Noble when we're back in the States. We'll try to get another beautiful bound, leather-bound classic, whether it's Hans Christian Andersen or Sherlock Holmes or Poirot by Agatha Christie, whatever, Charles Dickens, or we get some children's classics, including these just beautiful, glossy, heavy hardback with lovely illustrations about Beatrix Potter's work. I'm not going to go into much detail with these big ones because I showed them off in that previous video. And of course, Winnie the Pooh. A beautiful edition of Winnie the Pooh with lovely end papers. And of course, the wonderful stories and art in there. This collects Winnie the Pooh, the House at Pooh Corner, and the House at Pooh Corner together in one big edition. What else do I have here? I have the original Dodie Smith novel of 101 Dalmatians. This is a Puffin book. And this also has some illustrations, I believe. The 101 Dalmatians is one of my favorite Disney animated films. Being a boy, I was never really into the, princess part of Disney so much. The Snow Whites and the Cinderellas, the Sleeping Beauties. I was more into the Aristocats, the Rescuers, Lady and the Tramp, and 101 Dalmatians. So I love their anthropomorphized animals, those books. And I've read this years ago, and it's a really good book, actually. It's a really good version of the story. A little different from what you see in the movies, either the animated or live action version. And I don't have a lot of time for the live action one. I know it's quite well liked. Okay, now we're going to get to some series books, I think. Marjorie Sharp, speaking of The Rescuers by Marjorie Sharp. I believe this is another Dell Yearling edition. Now, she wrote a lot of adult novels, Marjorie Sharp did, but a British writer, and she's really witty and funny. And the rescuers are Bernard the mouse, who loves Miss Bianca, who is a pet of a son of an ambassador. So I'm guessing somewhere in Geneva or something to do with the United Nations or somewhere in Europe. And Bernard is her phlegmatic, down-to-earth, working class sort of pal, friend. He would like something more with Miss Bianca, I think, but keeps him at a friendship distance, but does care for him greatly. Anyway, they undertake a rescue operation. And again, we have illustrations by Garth Williams again. He does an amazing job of, here they are sneaking into the place where this man is. They've come across that news that he sent some note out. He's being held prisoner somewhere in this castle by a river in the Prisoner Aid Society. They figure that these mice can get in where humans can't and maybe help them escape. Here's the prisoner himself as the Bernard and Miss Bianca come in, and they're aided by various animals. I believe this is his name Niels? Yeah, Niels, the Danish or Dutch mouse that helps them. And there are several in this series. There's the turret. I can't remember clearly what they are, but I do have one more here, the final one, Bernard into Battle. It's a very slim little thing. This is when some rats invade the embassy, and Bernard and the teddy bear and a stuffed snake and a bunch of other mice defend the place, defend Miss Bianca. And this is a real fun one. Again, I haven't read these in decades, but I just have a nostalgic place in my heart for these books. Something that I do read as an adult and like a lot and have been collecting over the last decade or so are the Paddington books. So we have here the first one, A Bear Called Paddington. Again, another Dell Yearling edition. Got a sticker up here I got to get rid of. This was originally published, not this particular edition, but the book was published in 1958 by Michael Bond. Everyone knows Paddington. He's a very famous character. There are never any novels of Paddington. They're all short stories. They have these kind of iconic, simple line drawing, but very evocative illustrations by Peggy Fortnum, right? Of, Paddington getting up to all manner of mischief, well-meaning bear, but things always tend to go wrong when he's around. And then in kind of chronological order, going up to 1970, there are some that I'm missing, but I have more about Paddington. Paddington helps out. And again, almost all of these have 6 to 7 stories or so in each edition. Paddington at Large. Again, all illustrated by Miss Fortnum there. Paddington Marches On. These are all nice Dell editions. Paddington at Work. My wife also enjoys these, and these are good for her to read and practice her English. They're, witty and well written, but they're not using overly complicated vocabulary, I would say. And finally, I have Paddington Takes the Air. There are several more I want to get a hold of to kind of get a complete collection, at least not of the little younger readers storybook type, but the more chapter book types or stories. Okay, short stories. Then I have the decidedly odd but also iconic and extremely popular in Japan Moomin Troll series. I have some of those books, including, I believe, the first one. No, I don't think I have the first one. I don't think. Is this the first one? Fim Fanli Moomin Troll. And again, it's probably Tove Jansson. Now in Japan, this series is of books, and the characters are so famous, and there was a long-running kind of puppet stop-motion animation series and animated series, and very, very huge. These are, of course, from Finland. Tove Jansson was a Finnish writer. Writes a little note to the children. Very strange and, kind of European sensibility, I guess. A lot of emotional undercurrents and melancholy mixed in with all sorts of strange creatures. And of course, the Moomins live in this strange world, in their house, and all kinds of odd creatures running around there. Grok and Snufkin and, just a bunch of weird-ass creatures and imagination she has here. I always like it when they have chapters and say, in which this happens and this happens. In which Moomin Troll, Snufkin, and Sniff find the Hobgoblin's hat, how 5 small clouds unexpectedly appear, and how the Hemulin finds himself a new hobby. Again, these are written for children, but they're very strange, and I think, odd enough that kids would get into them as well as adults maybe enjoy reading them. And we have Moomin Land Midwinter. There's several of these that I don't have, but I grabbed these in Japan. I think this one I had when I brought with me Comet in Moomin Land, which is my favorite because it's a little bit more adventuresome. Again, very evocative illustrations. This is when a comet is approaching Moomin Land, and Sniff and Snufkin and Moomin Troll go on an adventure, kind of wandering around. There's Moomin Mama and Moomin Papa, etc. It's a very, very weird series. I can't really explain it very well, but in this one, quite interesting. Moomin Papa has memories of being at sea, and he decides to spend the summer tending a lighthouse and takes his whole family there. And Moomin Papa is kind of a gruff, taciturn, but big-hearted sort of character. And all the adventures that they have when they go to this remote island with its lighthouse outpost there. So obviously you see on the back there's several more that they put out. I don't have Moomin Valley in November, Moomin Summer Madness, Moomin Papa's Memoirs, or Tales from Moomin Valley. At least I don't have them here. Looks like there's a total of 8 of the main series. I don't have any of those, but I'll get a few more. They're very interesting reads, for sure. Okay, I just have a few more. I have another series of books, the Catfish Band books. Now, these are very interesting. These are by Ben Lucien Berman, with illustrated by Alice Caddy, if you want to even call it the word illustration. It's very, very, very simple illustrations. My good friend Kelly got me this edition. I used to read these as a kid. They're kind of set, I believe, in Louisiana, and there's a real element that flew over my head when I was a kid of kind of satire, political satire, what was going on down south at a certain time when they were written. This includes High Water at Catfish Bend, 7 stars for Catfish Bend, The Owl That Hoots Twice at Catfish Bend. And these were all published originally in the 50s. 52, 56, and 61, respectively. This particular combined edition from 1967. And we have some end papers inside here. And, you know, one of the things I always noticed with these books when I had the paperback editions is kind of the huge margins that were here. Here, I'm going to take off this beat-up dust jacket. Actually, the hard copy is probably better without it, the dust jacket. There's an introduction here talking about, you know, kind of the tone, the background of the books, set on around the Mississippi, and we got the raccoon who ends up being a mayor of Catfish Bend at some point, and then there's a character, the snake, and there's a bunch of, I guess, archetypes, southern archetypes. They're very strange, but I remember liking them as a kid, even if I didn't quite get all of the references to Southern culture and politics. And I also have the last, I believe, not in the same kind of editions, but from the cover anyway, but the last in the series, The Strange Invasion of Catfish Bend. I believe it's Strange Invasion. When the journey began, Doc Raccoon thought it was the best idea he'd ever had to go on a trip across America and share with every animal the secret of happiness they discovered in Catfish Bend. But instead it got Doc and all the creatures of the bend into the biggest trouble of their lives. Every animal in America was mad at them, from Florida's spookiest alligators to the Yukon's grisliest bears. And what started as a journey of friendship was ending up as a cross-country war. Back home, there was a buzzing in the air, a million angry wings waiting to strike, because in trying to share happiness with a place as big as America, the creatures of Catfish Bend had forgotten to be kind to the smallest animals on Earth. Now, it says soon to be a major Walt Disney motion picture, but nothing came of that, obviously. But they were, you know, the books did have some impact to get to the certain extent where it could have been made into an animated film. And you'll see very, very simplistic kind of art compared to some other stuff that I've shown you. But they're very interesting books. I haven't read any again for ages and ages, but they are not kind of the normal simplistic kids book that a lot of people think you might be getting with these. In fact, none of these really are. All of these have various levels. And again, a well-written children's book is just a well-written book. There are bad children's books. There are good children's books. And these are the ones that I tend to collect, in my opinion anyway, are good. Now, I have a couple more. I don't have all of the Dr. Doolittles by any stretch. I have a couple back home in the States in storage, but I do have this one here, Dr. Doolittle on the Moon. Now, Dr. Doolittle, I'm sure people will be aware of the mostly atrocious movies, including the old Rex Harrison musical, which at least has some fans for sure. This one has a few stains inside, unfortunately. Got this one used years ago, but by Hugh Lofting, and I believe Hugh Lofting does the illustrations. Does he do it himself? Told and illustrated by Hugh Lofting. So this, of course, as you might think, Dr. Doolittle can talk to the animals, walk with the animals, etc. And he and his assistant, he's a veterinarian basically, end up on the moon and encounter some strange creatures there. Interesting series, British kids book series. This is one that I've had for years, one of these, and then I finally found the prequel, the first book in the series. And this is Brim's Boat by Michael Gaunt, and Brim Rides Out. Now, Brim is a sheepdog, and he finds an abandoned, beat-up. This is an old library edition. In fact, they might both be old library editions. Yes, they are. They both have the library card still intact. This was from Frankfort, Kentucky library. Originally, I guess, how it ended up, I got it probably through some Amazon Marketplace or something. Again, some really nice illustrations. This is an interesting book, this series here, illustrated by Stuart Tresillian. And this is published by Coward McCann. Never heard of that. Coward McCann in New York. So Brim's Boat. In a valley deserted by human beings, Brim the terrier, he's a terrier, not a sheepdog, finds an old half-built barge. Immediately in his mind's eye, he sees the barge finished in himself as Captain Brim, unloading rich merchandise for the grateful and admiring animal community. But in the face of practical realities, the daydream recedes, though it never vanishes. Brim's friend, Twill the sheepdog, there is a sheepdog in here, I knew there was. Twill the sheepdog slows progress down by his kind but cautious attitude. Nark the marten tries to sabotage the whole boat-building scheme, but Brim holds firmly to his purpose. At last, the boat is ready, gleaming with green and red paint, but then the level of the canal starts falling. Only Oldest, the tortoise, knows how they, the humans, dealt with such problems, and he is on the point of hibernating. So basically, Brim getting the boat together, he gets some horses to pull it along the canal, and right as he's getting ready to launch it and become captain, it's threatened by receding waters and the dam, how to get the waters to come in again. Anyway, very interesting series. I guess I would say a book and its sequel. The sequel is the one I encountered first. Brim Sails Out. Now, again, I think a friend of mine, my good friend Kelly, who often got me a lot of the books that older hardbacks that I have that are a little more harder to find, gifted me several of those. He knew I loved this one from my library days. This one comes from, again, Frankfort, Kentucky. Wow. I know I didn't get these at the same time. Anyway, Brim Sails Out is, Brim's got his boat going. This is kind of about a invasion of the valley by nutria. Here's the crew of the boat taking a little rest. Anyway, really interesting book. So, no animal ever went out of the valley. If you did, that was the end of everything. Everyone knew the dangers out there were terrible. Brim the terrier was quite content to sail the great barge Mermaid up and down the canal in the valley, giving rides to his friends and delivering goods, until one day when Brim impetuously sails out into the forbidden plain to help a friend. Before he and his faithful crew, along with Twill the sheepdog, can return to the valley, a storm drives the barge into unknown territory. Disaster follows. Bravely, Brim sets out alone to get help, but he loses his way and is imprisoned by the Koipus, a strange folk with orange teeth who were settlers in a muddy swamp. I believe these are the nutria, which everyone knows can be real pests. An exciting adventure for readers who met Brim and his delightful animal friends in Brim's boat, and for new readers who are meeting them for the first time. Anyway, again, a whole bunch of nostalgia built into this little small collection of kids' books. Now, I have some other ones that I don't have with me here. For example, some by William Steig, again, more philosophical than you might think. Abel's Island, about a mouse being stranded on an island before he can get free, pining for his wife. And Dominic, about an adventurous young dog going on adventures and encountering villains and friends and life and death. Those are by William Steig. I have a couple of Oz books, of course, by L. Frank Baum. I have, let's see, Stowaway to the Mushroom Planet, which was a start of a series by Eleanor Cameron about some young children who go to another planet with mushroom people, I think. Of course, Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach, kind of another classic Edwardian or Victorian kids book called Return of the Twelves, about some toy soldiers that come back to life. The Mouse and His Child, which was turned into an animated film, also not 100% for kids, quite dark in some ways, similar to Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. I have a real fun group of books about kind of a tough gangstery sort of rat and his two pals, The Great Cheese Conspiracy, The Great Christmas Kidnapping Caper, The Great Rescue Operation by Jean Van Leeuwen. Those ones are really, really fun. I'm sure I have The Mouse and His Motorcycle, Runaway Ralph by Beverly Cleary, and The Incredible Detectives. I think that's a bird, a Siamese cat, and a bulldog by Don and Joan Caulfield. Several more I can't think of it right at the top of my head. So again, whether you'll be interested in any of this stuff, I have no idea. But if you do have fond memories, nostalgia for some of these child-friendly or children's books classics, please let me know in the comments below. I'd be really interested to hear what you think. And again, I'm not ashamed to say I like kids' books. Again, I don't read a lot of them. They're not a major part of my diet by any stretch. These would probably be all classified mostly for like middle grade readers, perhaps a few for earlier than that. But, you know, they're of a writing caliber and vocabulary level that would be beyond the average little kid. So, you know, I think these are fun. And again, I'll just finish by saying a well-written book is a well-written book. It doesn't matter if it's for kids, for teens, for adults, whatever. The truism holds. So I hope you found something of interest here. I will see you in another video in the future. Thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you again in another video.